Welcome to MuscleCar. The Camaro is done. Old blue hair, it's out of here. You're gonna see the Challenger in a couple of weeks, you know, Project Overkill, getting some body work done on it. So the shop is pretty much empty. Well, kinda. I've got a piece of a project here, and I'm gonna show you how to take any standard Chevy front end and convert it to hold any big block, small block, or LS motor for under $500. This is a really popular front end. You can find it in first generation Camaros or second generation Novas, just like the one in old blue hair. We wanted the option to put the Nova back to stock someday, so we saved all the original parts. And I didn't want to cut up the crossmember, but the design of the LS engine's oil pan needed more room. So I raised up the engine to its limit with taller engine mounts, but we still had the challenge with the headers, since the steering box was in the way. However, it was the right choice for that project. Now there's some custom oil pans that'll solve this crossmember issue, but they can cost you up to $500, still leaving you with your steering box, forcing you to spend even more money on a custom-made set of headers. So for the same price as a new oil pan, I'm going to show you how to solve both of these problems. I'm going to cut a big chunk of the crossmember out and reinforce it with tubing, then you can shove any engine combination you want in here. We're going to move the steering from over here to up front with a rack and pinion, solving your header problem. And all that for $500. Whoa! Some things I'm not going to reuse, so why wrestle with it? Before I started, I measured every angle of this frame, side to side and opposite corners, just to make sure it was worth modifying. Then I welded it level to the table. Now, before we go any further, this temporary crossmember will keep things square. A 14-inch span will give me more than enough room for the LS2 all the way to a Hemi. These are the original engine mount holes for a Chevy. Being that I don't know what I'm going to put in here, I'm going to leave them just in case. After it's boxed in, I'll tie both sides together with some 1x1 tubing. And a little more for strength. So far, I only spent $35 in steel to make room for some big power. Later on, we're gonna make room for some big headers. But after the break, I'm gonna take you guys to an auction where history was for sale. And sometimes, history's just really hard to let go of. You Pontiac guys are gonna like this. Glad you're back, because we're going to an auction. Some of you people have never heard of the Randy Williams collection, but you Pontiac fans, you know who it is. 5 classic Super Duties, and they're all perfect. This sale is yet another chapter in their rich history.
I have 100,000, you better get 1 1/4. You better get 125, 125. 80 here, you better get 75 and 80.
170,000, gotta go!
I have 150, man, you better get 160. $710,000.
They'll move about $35 million in muscle this weekend at the Mecum High Performance Auction outside of Chicago. This one's got every kind of muscle you can think of, and the prices you wouldn't believe.
Give $1 million and you better get $900,000. 270,000. 270, 80. 280,000. 210.
210.
Arthur sold.
Sold. 210,000. Give them a hand, guys.
A lot of stuff here. Guys like us can only look at and wish. How about the very last Hemi Cuda ever made? And an early funny car totally restored. A 74 42 W30 convertible, an original 427 Cobra, an LS6 Chevelle with just 28 miles on it. Cars like that are what this auction's all about.
625, 650.
But the real stars of this show are extremely rare, and they came in together. 5 factory hot rods that gave Pontiac a whole new reputation in the early 60s, restored better than new. Back then, Pontiacs were the kind of car your grandma would drive. No street rep at all. So So GM stuck some big engines in some lightweight bodies and called them Super Duties and started tearing up the track. Pontiac collector Randy Williams found 5 of the most important Super Duties and got Scott Teeman to restore them. Randy died of a brain tumor before they were finished.
Our particular shop, we started on these cars in the spring of 1998 for Randy and Gene, and I believe we finished the last car in 2003.
This one came first, a '63 Catalina known as the Swiss cheese car. One of just 14 special lightweights with plastic windows, aluminum body panels, and over 120 holes drilled in the frame. Weight, 3,350. Horsepower, they said 410, but it was really more like 500.
This particular car, they campaigned it only that first year, 1963, where it was at the U.S. Nationals with the car. Ran a best of 12:32 at 116 or 117. And at the end of the year, they painted the car blue and sold it off the dealership lot.
There's nothing like them anywhere in the world. Perfectly restored factory drag racers from the peak of the Super Duty years, 61 to 63. A 61 Ventura with a 389, a lightweight 62 Catalina with a 421, and the last Super Duty built before GM quit racing in 63. The guy who restored all of these calls this one the pinnacle of the Super Duty program. A 63 Tempest wagon with a 421 up front and a few little extras in the back.
They cast up another gear case behind the differential, added a dry clutch. So what we have is planetaries ahead of the differential, planetaries behind the differential, and you're able to create 4 forward speeds. Of course, we've got a dry clutch, so we rev this thing up, we let out the clutch. After that, you just move the shifter, you've got 4 forward speeds without touching the clutch.
And after so many years of building his collection, you know selling them's just gotta be hard.
My husband put his heart and soul into these cars. And sometimes I feel like I'm selling his heart and soul.
They rolled them all in at once, with the pipes opened up for that sound of real 60s muscle.
These cars are priceless, ladies and gentlemen. These cars are absolutely priceless automobiles with the world's best restorations.
And you didn't have to be a Pontiac guy to know that this was something special.
In 20 years, we've sold 50,000 cars, and these are the 5 finest cars we've ever offered.
The plan was to sell them all together, all 5, one price.
Start at $5 million. How you like that? $4 million.
But 5 million, or even 4, was looking too high.
Down 5. 1 million, down 5.
1 million for all 5, then $1.2 million. Then they were stuck around $1.5 million. Another tough call. Split up the collection and sell them one by one. The Swiss cheese went first, bringing in 462 grand. The Tempest wagon brought in 656 grand, the most of the 5. Legendary Pontiac racer Arnie the Farmer Bestwick watched the collection cross the auction block and remembered driving these cars when they were new.
These cars were far superior to any competition out there.
$1,806,000 was the total for all 5. Every one an important part of Pontiac history and drag racing legend. And while the collection's broken up now, Randy Williams' legacy lives on in these 5 old cars. Throwbacks to the days when nothing can run with a Super Duty. After the break, we'll give you some auction tips on a real-world budget. In case you just joined us, today's show is all about value. From budget frame modifications to sky-high bids at a classic muscle car auction. But an auction is still a good place to find your next project car. Here's some tips from a friend of ours.
You're right, the original Yankee Peddler.
And what are the good boys? Start them in, ladies and gentlemen, $1 million.
You know know these prices are getting out of hand. But come on.
700,000. Do you want to bid? I'm a 735, bid 50 now, 735, 750. I'm a 750, 760, 760. Reserve sold, $750,000. Sold the car, 750,000.
Some of these TV auction cars are bringing insane money, way more than the regular guy can afford. The last of the Hemi Cuda got bids close to $750,000, and that's still too low.
Got to close the bid of $700,000. But the bid goes on. It's going to take closer to $900,000 to buy it.
The first impression is important to me.
Colin Coleman sells about 200 classic muscle cars a year out of his shop in Milwaukee. Guys approach him all the time trying to get big money for cars they found in a barn or in a backyard somewhere. Most of the time, they're disappointed because they don't know what they really have or what it's really worth. Colin says if you want to sell a muscle car, the internet is a great place to start because you can find out what cars like yours are actually selling for.
Do the vent caps come with the car?
And you can go and Google just about anything and find out who's selling a car like yours, find out where to find the numbers on the car, document it, really establish what you own and what other people seem to think they're worth.
How about a 73 Z28 with 4,100 miles on it, original tires, window sticker, and a full set of papers? It went for $51,000. Without all of that, it's just another Camaro. So what's the chance you might find some big money muscle hanging out behind a shed somewhere? Colin says pretty small, but it could happen.
Absolutely. Not as many as there used to be, but there's a lot of cars still hiding out there.
And if you just want some muscle to drive, there's a way around these crazy prices.
It's a 68 Plymouth Satellite convertible. 318 V8 automatic. Nice weekend driver.
Look for something that's almost classic muscle, but not quite. A Satellite's not a Roadrunner. It's the same body, but with a 318 in there, this one needs some help. A new engine, fix it up, you got yourself a street fighter.
Good starting point for a project. It's a cheap way to get in if you're willing to do some work yourself. Do a little welding, a little fabricating, buy some restoration parts from somebody and make yourself a car.
Final bid on the Satellite was $18,500, less than half of what a Roadrunner in the same shape would cost. Do some work on it, drop a big block in it, you come out ahead.
It's a clone, it's a tribute car.
Frank Boucher figures his Challenger TA clone cost him a lot less than the real thing, but it's still muscle.
Every car today looks the same, and for what this car, hopefully it'll sell somewhere in the mid-20s. That's what a Toyota Camry is, and this has got a lot more eyeball than a Toyota Camry.
We're always gonna have the chance to spend big money on muscle cars. Anything totally original with all the paperwork is gonna cost you.
160, bid 170, close the hood.
125, drop it down, roll away, 290, 300,000.
Get your hands in here, 34,000.
175,000.
Sold, 37, sold, you buy Frank, 37,000.
Sold it, 530,000.
But for those of us who don't need a high-dollar museum piece, you can still find something to drive. It'll need some work, but hey, that's what it's all about. Stay with us, because we're going back to the shop to finish that budget front end.
Sold 28, sold 28.
What do you say we get back on our budget front end modification? For under $500, we're gonna make this standard Chevy piece acceptable for any small block, big block, LS motor, or even a Hemi. So far, we spent $35 on steel to make room for all those oversized oil pans. Now, we'll relocate the steering to the front to avoid the guaranteed header clearance nightmare. I'm gonna add another $180 to our tally with this rack and pinion from Competition Engineering. It's an efficient space saver, and with it mounted up front, we'll have plenty of room for some massive headers. I'll need a little clearance here and make a channel for the shaft right here. I'm giving us lots of leeway here because the project for this front end hasn't been determined yet. This gaping hole won't weaken anything because I'm going to box it in with some 2x3 083 wall mild steel. In keeping with our budget, I reinstalled our factory upper and lower control arms. For another 90 bucks, I got these S10 drop spindles from Beltec because they're a front steer design. $25 more, outer tie rod ends from a T-Bird. It's really important to have all that stuff in place so I can mount my rack for one simple reason: bump steer. When working with suspensions, visualize each part as if it was moving in its own independent circle. The upper ball joints, the lower ball joints, and the outer tie rod ends. Even though these circles are different in size, they all must intersect at the spindle at ride height. If the tie rod end from the rack and pinion is too high or too low, its circle won't intersect with the rest, causing stress and tension throughout the suspension. That tension and chaos needs to be released somewhere, and it's usually with the wheel being jerked towards the weakest point during suspension travel. It's called bump steer. It's not good because you're out of control. I'm going to show you how to set up your rack the right way. With the arms set at ride height, position the tie rod ends so they're level. Now move the rack and pinion so it's level as well. Then simply weld some nuts to the cross member and mount it up. Well, there you have it. We're in the hole for $335. New control arm bushings, stock disc brakes, $550. I know, I'm $50 over, but it's still worth it because now this front end will nest everything from the LS motor to the mighty Duramax diesel. At this point, I'm going to blow the whole front end apart. I'm going to send it out and have it sandblasted and primed. I'm not going to have it powder coated or painted because I don't know what project I'm going to use it on. But if you want to throw your budget out the window for another $900, you could upgrade these control arms to these Fat Man Fabrication ones. They come in 1-inch narrowed or stock like these. They're made of 1-inch 188 wall DOM tubing with machined cross shafts, stock ball joints installed, direct fit for our front end. The bottom line, they're stronger, and they're not 30 years old. Now, why go through all the trouble with this old subframe? A new aftermarket one could cost you up to $6 grand. This one, $1,400 in it. Now, they're becoming an endangered species, so next time you find one, you might want to nab it, because now you know how to update it. Later.